Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. Again, as usual, I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett. I'm excited today to be joined by Ken Miller. Ken is a dynamic trainer, speaker, author, and consultant, and he's much more than that because we're going to dive into his story. But he focuses on resilience because of his own journey from recovery to professional success, which underscores his keynotes on topics such as resilience in the face of the known and unknown. As the president of Denali FSP Fundraising and Grant Consultants, he leads transformative fundraising strategies, empowering nonprofits across all sectors. Ken's workshops, such as Making the Ask with Confidence and digital, online, and social media for fundraising success, are tailored to deliver practical, actionable insights for fundraising professionals. Recognized for his dynamic speaking style, he engages audiences with his deep knowledge of fundraising best practices, major donor relations, and nonprofit leadership, ensuring participants leave equipped for impactful outcomes. And let's just talk about resilience. Let's talk about resilience. So, Ken, one of the things that really stood out to me is you reached out and said, "Hey, I want to be on your podcast." Is so here we just love diving into curiosities, right? Like there's no real agenda here other than just my own curiousness. So meeting people like yourself is fantastic. But really kind of so to highlight your story, and I'll let you really dive into it, but Ivy League graduate, then homeless for 20 years, incarcerated, um, and then back on your feet and now excelling. Kind of walk us through that a little bit. How does that all play out?
Well, first of all, Jeremy, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share. 'Cause that's what I do is I share. And,
We love
I
it.
tell story, I tell stories, I have lessons learned, I have experiences, but I just share. And I share from my heart and I share to the best of my ability truth. Okay. Very simple. My name's Ken Miller, 62 years old. I'm a black, I'm a mixed, child. And at one time, I remember someone said, "You're a mulatto. Are you a mulatto?" And I had to think about that one. I've been called a lot of things, but I've never been called a mulatto. But I did by this one person. My
Wow.
mother was white and my father
Yeah.
was black. And I'll just give the quick, uh, overarching life story. Very simply, I was born in 1962. My mother was a runaway teenage girl who got caught up with a black married drug dealer and pimp. And she got pregnant at age 17. And I was put up for adoption at birth. Remember, this is 1962. Child in New York. Did 6 years of foster homes. I was adopted by Irene and Sam Miller. When I was adopted at age 7, I could not read, I could not write, I could not tell time, nor could I tie my shoes because I'd gone through these foster homes that didn't really care about that. I would learn how to read that first summer of my adoption and fell in love with reading. I was precocious as a child. And by the time I was 17 years old, I was a National Merit Scholar. I was accepted to Harvard and I went to Dartmouth for my undergrad degree, Ivy League, Hanover, New Hampshire. I graduated 4 years later with a degree in fraternity with a minor in drinking. That was my degree.
Well, I want to interject there a little bit, right? I so okay. So foster child finally gets adopted. Um so do you like your desire to go on to pursue an Ivy League education? Was that strictly from reading? Like, was it reading? Like, what brings that about? And maybe kind of take us into like, so after being adopted, what did your home life look like? Was this an upper class family? Was like, what was that experience?
Well, my parents were Irene and Sam Miller. And this is somewhat important because it has something to do with what happened later on. So my father had been married before and had two children, Michael and Christine. But they were adults when I was born. In fact, my brother was in Vietnam, 1969, and my sister was Christine. But they're again much older than I. I was 6 years old, six, yeah, going on 7, and they were late teens, early 20s, but late teens. So my father was an alcoholic and he was a violent alcoholic. He was a self-pitying alcoholic. My mother was a teetotaler. My mother was educated. She ended up getting her master's from Columbia Teachers College, which is one of the top two schools of education.
Yeah.
Usually we count University of Chicago and Columbia, the different schools of thought, and was working on her doctorate when my father shot her. And we'll talk about that at a later point in the conversation.
Okay.
So, being that my father was an alcoholic, what do you say, my growing up? I grew up in the country, and I mean country. I would say middle class. Yeah, middle class. My mother was a teacher, instructor, and administrator of nursing programs. So she was an RN. And then my father was an accountant, but a lower level accountant. And I grew up literally in the country. There were no kids I could play with within walking distance. That's how much country I grew. My address was RD1, which stands for Rural Delivery 1. But the mailman knew where everybody lived on that road. So, you just see the name, and we're all RD1. So grew up RD1, town of Bloomingburg, New York. Wait, and I could say that. At one point, I was the only black male in my school. There was two black females, but this was the environment I grew up, but very rural. The number one thing, rural. And then
Yeah.
at 8, 12, I moved to Alaska. We moved to Alaska. It wasn't me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I grew up high school, junior high and high school in Anchorage, Alaska. And that's really was very formative for me. I did very, very well in school, but it wasn't hard. It was one grade, one class per grade in the school. That's how small it was, my school, elementary.
Wow.
That was my childhood. There was so much more to my childhood, but the predominant thing was probably fear. I had a lot of fear.
Yeah.
But I always knew I was different. How I say that, Jeremy, I don't wanna come across a certain way, but people have to interpret what I have to say by how I say it. But I was always different. I knew that I was adopted. I knew that. I knew I was a foster child. I knew that I was a little different than the other kids because I wasn't white, number one.
Yeah.
And growing up in that environment, being the only black male was different. Not that I had a lot of prejudice, I just knew I was different. And then my home life was, I thought, different because I didn't see the other kids I would stay overnight. They didn't have a raging alcoholic father.
Mhm.
At least I didn't see it,
Sure. Yeah.
but it was beautiful growing up in the country.
No, it's yeah. Well, New England, upstate New York, like it's
Beautiful.
gorgeous. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And then Anchorage, Alaska has its own level of beauty for sure. So, okay, so mom's an educator and very educated. So, I assume that had some contribution to your diligence in your study, but it sounds like just inherently passionate about reading and smart kid overall, which all kind of attributed to that. Okay, I'm gonna do awesome at school and then see where it takes me.
Yeah, I didn't think of it as being awesome at school. I just did the school work. I took advanced placement in high school. I was the first one, at least in my high school, to ever score 100 on one of the tests that we had in the advanced placement history. I took advanced placement English,
Yeah.
did well, got fours and fives in both of those. So I went to Dartmouth and I got credit at an Ivy League school for something I did when I was 15, right? But I didn't think this was unusual. You understand what I'm saying? I didn't think I was anything special. I just know that when I came to apply for colleges, you start in 11th grade. I had approximately 160 colleges ask me to matriculate or ask me to apply. I had no sense, none whatsoever, that I wouldn't get in. Never thought about that. I just thought you applied and you got into where. So out of the 160, I think it was 168. I'm a very ordered person. I only applied to 3 colleges. And so remember, my mom went to Columbia's Teachers College,
Yeah.
Ivy League, but that's the master's program and PhD program. But I had gone with her. back in the early 70s. So I was very and so my mother knew the Ivy League, and she wanted me to go to one of the Ivy so the 3 colleges I applied to were Harvard, because it's Harvard,
Yeah.
Dartmouth, because it's in the country, and then Oberlin in Ohio, because they were the first
Interesting.
college to
Okay.
let blacks and females in. They were back in like the 1850s. And I
Yeah.
was impressed by that when I was 16, very impressed by that. So I go off on this trip. I come back and I got these letters waiting for me, and they're going to say yay or nay. Now, remember, I never thought I could not get in. So I open up, the first letter, Oberlin, yes, we'd love for you to matriculate. Open up Dartmouth, yes, we'd love for you to matriculate. Open up Harvard, yes, we'd love for you to matriculate. Because remember, I had a lot of things in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. For sure.
Black, I did very well on my SATs. I did a tremendous amount of extracurricular extracurricular activities. I was I played sports. I mean, I checked all the boxes. Okay. So I have all these three acceptance. My mom, I'll never forget, my mom seen me and said, Kenneth, which school do you want to go to? And I said to her, I said, Oberlin. And she says, that's great. What's your first choice? And I'm like, I'll go to Dartmouth then, because I hated cities, hated cities.
Mm.
Grew up in a country.
Yeah.
Anchorage is a quarter of a million, small town.
Well,
But
in the 70s, it was much smaller than it is today for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It was
yeah.
like
Yeah.
170 when we went there in 75. But I lived. That's why I didn't even apply to Yale, didn't apply to Columbia. I didn't count Brown or Cornell or Penn as being a real Ivy. That's just me. And I found out later I would have liked Princeton, but I didn't apply to Princeton because I'm a New Yorker, and New Yorkers hate New Jersey. We just
Can't cross
you're like
can't cross the
trained
river.
to not like New Jersey. I drive through Garden State, Parkway or Highway and Palisades and Inglewood, but no, did not like New Jersey. I found out later I would have liked Princeton, but I love Dartmouth, and I'm very very glad I went.
So, okay, so Ivy League education, brilliant kid, just the upbringing, right? Like, and recognizing to some degree that you're different, right? Like, I can't, like, I imagine growing up in Anchorage, Alaska in the 70s, there probably wasn't a lot of black kids in your high school.
Actually, there
Or am I,
were,
were there? Okay. All right.
yeah. So here I go.
I'd imagine a decent amount of natives, but okay.
So I come from upstate New York, but all they know is I'm a black guy from New York.
Yeah. So
I
they all
go
think
to
New
the
York
I
City.
go to the I go to the basketball court, and they think I can hoop. I can't hoop. And somebody said, "Well, what's the newest dance?" Gosh, dance. I can't dance. I don't know how to dance. I literally did not know how to dance.
Yeah.
And I'm a black kid, and I was very, very, like you say, protected for a lot of different reasons, and very naive. Okay, so I even went off but so I go off to college coming out of Alaska, and I'm very naive. I'm 17 years old. I had a Jerry curl, which is these curls, really a California curl,
Yeah.
which had gone out of fashion like 2 years before. I have a jean jacket that has all heavy metal bands on it because I grew up loving heavy metal music. I got Black Sabbath, I got, Black Sabbath, Van Halen, whatever. But they're written on my jacket, like,
Yeah.
graffiti. And this Jerry curl, you're talking about a fish out of water.
And this would have been what, 1980, right?
1980,
Yeah.
all September of 1980. I'd never been to Dartmouth. I had never seen a preppy person. I didn't even know they existed and didn't like them. So anyhow, I'm this fish out of water. I can't drive. I'm 17. I'd never had a girlfriend. I'm 17. I mean, I am a nerd. Okay. And so I get there and I go to the fraternity and I have my first drink. And within a month, I'm a full blown alcoholic. Full blown alcoholic. What does that mean? It means when I start drinking, I cannot, with any certainty, control the amount I drink.
Yeah.
and I drink to excess, and I make really bad decisions. Okay. And that's within a month of my first drink, full blown. And my father was an alcoholic. I did not want to become an alcoholic, but it's genetic for me.
So for sure. And but so what like having seen that growing up,
Mhm.
did like what was it kind of a cool like was it to try to fit in? Like why not completely avoid it growing up in that environment of like, okay, I see what alcohol does, right? Like and if your mom's a teetotaler, right? Like she's not drinking at all. Why like what kind of spurred on that decision to okay, I'll go ahead and take my first drink here?
People ask me that question, and I actually am surprised. That's what we do in college. We drink. That's what you do. You go to that's and you gotta understand, Dartmouth is in the country, small town called Hanover. You can't go into the city and do city things. You are
Yeah.
very limited, especially back in 1980, what you could do socially. You either drank in the dorm or you drank at the on frat row. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's normal for 18-year-old. That's normal for college. And then the other thing I found out when I drank, I could talk to women. I could talk to girls. I mean, literally. And then there was a camaraderie. We call it a frat, but it's just a gang. It's a gang by another name because
Yeah.
I got involved with gangs on the street. Anyway, this isn't a gang. And what they do is a fraternity, at least a fraternity like mine, and it's I don't blame my fraternity for anything of my drug or alcohol, but what they do is they create an environment that's conducive to massive amounts of drinking, drugs, and poor behavior, especially toward women. It was an environment that was conducive to that, and that we would protect each other and also co-sign on bad behavior.
Yeah. So so you're kind of so your rise to the top, you go to this Ivy League school, you graduated, right? So it didn't completely derail you. Like you talk about, you minored in alcohol, but that one drink kind of stems this certain aspect of your lifestyle now. Where at what point now do you feel like you derail?
So this is interesting. I don't get to talk about this a lot. It's in the book, most of this. So what happened was when I came back from college, I came back a mess. A mess.
Came back to Anchorage.
Yes, back
Okay.
home.
Yep.
No job prospects. I laid on the couch. One of the things is I'd been removed from the alcohol. I was drinking every single day to excess. I come back, I'm cold turkey off the alcohol because I'm at home with my mom and depressed. That was a pretty common emotion for me. And so my mother said, "Hey, we're going somewhere on Monday." I said, "Great." Because I thought she was going to buy me a car because a lot of my fraternity brothers, they got a brand new car for graduating. So I'm like, "Hey, cool." So we go and we pass all the dealerships. I'm like, "What's up with this?" And then we finally my mom took me to my first drug treatment center. And that was my gift for graduating. And so I went to treatment and I was remained sober for the next 2 years.
So
And
could
then
she just tell, or did you guys talk about it
she
at
had
all?
known for years.
Yeah.
They asked me to go to my first meeting summer after my freshman year. I went to my first AA meeting summer after my freshman year because, again, I started in October. By December, I'm a full blown alcoholic. I continued drinking, but I didn't get in as much trouble early on because that has to build up. That has usually has to build up, but you can do it the first time you drink. You can still, get a DUI or crash and kill someone or and get involved with some assault or whatever. Doesn't doesn't wait, but it definitely does build up and gets worse over time. So I graduate, I'm sober, I go into the corporate world. I'm making $50,000 a year in 1985, which is very good.
Yeah.
And I'm wearing a suit and tie, Hickey Freeman suits, Allen Edmond wingtip shoes. I'm square driving a Pontiac station wagon. I could buy any car in the world, and I buy a Pontiac station wagon.
Love it.
Okay, 'cause I'm square. And then I relapsed, and within about 2 years, I was homeless on the streets, and I was to remain that way for about 20 years.
So, okay, and a lot of this just we can attribute like addiction is tough, right? Like it's addiction is a horrible thing, right? Like
Okay.
in regardless of what we're addicted to, right? Like so this derails you, right? Like you go from your job, but there's still this looming addiction, and you've confronted it, been sober for a little bit, but then relapse again, and that derails you, and now you nothing. You're on the street. It's been 20 years on the street. What? So at what point, like as you're going through this period of like, okay, relapse, drug addiction, alcohol, right? Like at some point you recognize that you have worth. You've talked about it before. Kind of help us like what did that recognition do to change your state and get you out of this 20-year cycle of in and out of prison, homeless, addicted, etc.
So it all comes down, those two things that happened. September 22nd, 2004. I wake up in a closet in this apartment building. I'd been staying there for 2 or 3 days in the closet with the roaches, with my crack pipe, my 40 ounce of natural ice beer. And the landlord came and found me in the closet, like, you got to go. So I get up and I leave. I had just come off a period. So, and I talk about this from the stage, and I hope this is going to be all right. But I had been a male prostitute. That's what I did. I prostituted myself on the streets, Ivy League and everything. And I made a decision that if I could not go back to treatment, I was going to commit suicide. That was my decision. So I called my mother and I said, can you send me to treatment one more time up in Seattle? I'm in Reno, Nevada. And she said, Kenneth, I'll have a ticket waiting for you at the bus station because I was not allowed in her home. She lived in Reno because I burglarized her. I robbed her. And so I wasn't allowed in the home. I'm the only child, remember? And she
Yeah.
had this tremendous love for me. So I went out there and did a drug hustle and had a $10 rock of crack cocaine. I went to sell that and I was arrested by the street enforcement team, Reno police. And I'm hemmed up waiting for the paddy wagon. And I had tears flowing. And the cop came up to me and he said, why are you crying? Because he thought maybe I was hurt or something had happened, whatever. And I was smiling too as I'm crying. I said, because I'm going to live. I can do prison all day long. I've been there twice before. I've done years. I
Yeah.
can't do streets. I can't do Ken on the streets. So that was number one. I had some hope at that point. And then about a month and a half later, I'm lying down on the bunk in jail awaiting sentencing, which I was sentenced to 6 years. But I was also told that the next time I came in with a felony, I was getting 25 to life, habitual criminal statute. And I still believe him. You know, he's Judge Hardesty is on the Supreme Court now, Nevada Supreme Court. So anyway, lying there, and I had a conversation with God. Make it real simple, and I listened to him, and he said it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be without pain or discomfort. This journey, but I'll be there. I will be there with you. I'll walk with you. Just get through it. This too shall pass. And literally, I still remember I tell this story all the time. Ever since then, I've been willing to undertake whatever I need to do to get better. And I did a lot of work on getting better. I don't spend a lot of time getting better anymore. I am well. I am well. I am competent to life. I like me. People like me. I have a beautiful wife. I got grandchildren. I do. And I'm successful business wise. I'm successful financially. My health is good. So instead, I try to give out. Instead of working on me, because I'm good where Ken is, I'm good. I work on trying to help others. That's why I'm on this podcast,
Yeah.
is so hopefully I can help others, inspire others.
For sure. No, I love your mission of like reciprocating, right? And okay, now it's time to really give back and right, like I'm in this place, right? I so during the 20 years, right? Like are there moments where you're like, I'm better than this? Like I shouldn't be like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments. There's a lot of moments in prison, on the streets. There's other moments. I remember I was with a very good friend of mine in LA and we're smoking crack. And he looked at me. He was like my best friend at the time. And I looked at him and I remember him saying, "Are we having fun yet?" And we're just two black male crackheads. And I'm like, "Or not." You know, you said it in that way. Are we having fun yet? No, this is not fun. And I knew, and that's what made it even worse because I knew I could be better than this. I'd worked for 3M, I'd worked for Kodak, I'd had employees, I had done things. I had modeled, I'd been in a movie. I mean, I've done a lot of things, and I've always had these opportunities, and then I would destroy them by relapsing. Because when I talk about this 20 years on the streets, 14 inpatient treatment centers, 14, 3 prison terms. I don't even count going to jail. I don't count that. Those are misdemeanors. There was numerous. But in
Yeah.
between, I'd have sometimes 3 months, 6 months. Once I even had another 2 years of being clean and sober, and I threw that away on a relapse.
So you mentioned earlier here that you had a lot of fear growing up, that there was kind of this overwhelming fear. Would you attribute fear to getting you out of this? Because you mentioned the judge kind of laid down the law. He's like, okay, like this is the third time. If you come in for a fourth, you got 25 to life.
No, that's not why. No,
Okay.
not. There can be a motivator.
Yeah, but I don't feel like fear can be a life changer. Like if we live
Eh,
based on fear, then we're not truly rising above who we ought to be, right? And so where does the intrinsic motivation or the intrinsic change happen at this point 20 years ago when you're kind of facing it all again, right? And then it's like, okay, now I'm actually really going to make a serious change versus every other time that you attempted it before.
the intrinsic change was that conversation with God. That was
Okay.
it. That was the
Yeah,
moment. From then on, but doesn't mean I still don't have to do work. So
sure. Yeah.
well, let me explain this. So you go to jail for 3 months. I've been to prison 3 times. It takes about 3 months to work your way through the court system. Then you go into prison. Prison always is one, you have to be doing at least a year to go into prison. It means you have a felony. Jail is misdemeanor and those awaiting sentencing or court. Okay, so we get that out of the way. I get to prison, and I remember I'm walking into the same prison. I've been twice before, because it's what they call a classification unit. And I said to myself, if I am the same person coming out of this prison that I am going in, I'm going to have the same results. So there's 4 areas I have to work on: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And I literally I just looked at it the other day. One year I read 170 books when I was locked down because I write down every single book that I've ever read, well, since the last 20 years. Okay. So I worked on the intellectual because it was not good, my intellect. I worked on the physical and ended up powerlifting and did very, very well. Okay. Came in second strongman competition on that whole yard of 1,100 men. Okay. And then
That's impressive.
it is impressive, but remember, it's weight based. There's a formula that we use. So I lifted, I was 198 and I did a 518 deadlift, which is the record on that
Yeah.
yard at 198. That is good. Drug free. Okay. So that's physical's taken care of. Intellectual is taken care of. But my two main ones, but really for my purposes, was emotional because I was so shame based.
Yeah.
And because, I had done so the pretty much the lowest thing you could do on the streets is be a male prostitute. And I didn't want anybody to find that out. There were people who knew, but I definitely didn't want any of the guys inside to know that, let alone the people on the streets. So I had to deal with that secret. And I talk all the time from the stage about taking away the power of the secret and then taking away and looking at what is shame, and especially what is shame versus guilt. Very simple. Guilt is I did, shame is I am. Okay. And I had a very, very negative connotation. I am less than. I am not worthy of love. I am not competent to life. So I sat down with a counselor, told one person, then I told a small group, then I told a larger group, and now I can get in front of thousands. I get on podcasts. I've said it on 20 podcasts. Doesn't bother me. It's in my book. Doesn't bother me. People who know me like me. People who don't like me don't like me. I don't know who they are, but I'm sure there's a few.
So, okay, so you use the word shame here, right? We've talked about fear a little bit. So you're repeating this cycle over and over, right? And but but at some point it breaks, right? And now you have this conversation with God and you're like, okay, I know that I've got to come out a different person. So, what would you tell somebody? Like, shame is a real thing, right? Like the I am state. You talk about the I am statements, right? Like, and I am statements go all the way back, right? Like, they're biblical, they're Greek philosophy, right? Like, we can go like the Stoics use it, right? Like, there is power in saying I am, right? Like the Jehovah is there with Moses and he says I am, right? Like I am that I am. And there is this self-proclamation of who we are and what our worth is by saying I am, right? Like if I am a drug addict or I am an alcoholic, that's what I believe myself to be and that's what I will esteem to be, right? Versus like approaching it in the way of okay, these are the things that I do or have done, but it's not who I am. And learning to separate those two, I think, are really essential to our progression. But how? So you've gone through it and you're teaching people now how to kind of do it. But how do you? So let's take an example, right? Somebody that is like, okay, I know I should be doing better. I'm smoking, I'm drinking, like, I'm stuck on these problems. Like, I want to get out of it but I don't feel like I'm worthy to get out of it because this is who I am. How do you help somebody get out of that and know that, hey, your worth is more than what you do, right? You are greater than what you're doing right now.
Well, I have some suggestions. I've worked with a lot of guys, and I do a lot of mentoring.
Like, I get ultimately it comes down to the individual choice, right? Like, we all have to make our own individual choice,
Yeah, but there are
right? But,
things
like,
we can recommend or
yeah,
suggest that will help. So my core fundamental is truth. It's truth. And most people are not willing to look at truth. So what is truth? This is the way I describe it. Truth is a hallway. And in that hallway, there are doors. And the door will say age 7. Door will say age 17. Door will say age 34. And we need to go into that door because something happened when you were 34. You know what it was, but you don't want to go in that door. You don't want to go in that door. You don't want to turn on the light and observe and try to get an understanding of that set piece. And so what I can do, and remember, I'm not a counselor, but I do this for myself and I've worked with guys to do this. And all I'm saying, let's go in that door. Let's talk about it. You know, it's going to stay here. I've done so many fifth steps, on the anonymous programs, fearless moral inventories. And then I've talked to numerous men and they know it's safe. I'll never share it with anyone, my wife, anyone. It remains with us. And believe me when I tell you, I've heard everything. Okay. Okay, everything. So we go in the room, we observe, and we allow that set piece to come to light. And that's talking in our consciousness. And then it's such a relief when we understand the truth. What is our place? What was the place of the other players or other actors within that set piece, within that room? Because I had a bunch of those rooms.
yeah.
And until I could start talking about it. Okay, so that's one. Let's find out what truth is. And then I'm a big one. Let's do some esteemable things. They can be small. Let's do some esteemable things. Let's say thank you to 3 people, or let's call up 2 people and say, I appreciate you. Let's be accountable to someone. Let's be responsible. Every guy I've been mentoring for 15 years. I've had hundreds of mentor meetings, explicit mentor meetings. And every single meeting, we start off the same way. Tell me about a win. Tell me about a win. And I've never had a man not be able to tell me about a win. That's happened since the last time we spoke. Yeah. Okay. So we do esteemable things, which bring up the self-esteem. And then we start taking away the power of the secret. Because in the end, I've always said this, I can tell more about your self-esteem by how you take a compliment than by how you take a criticism. Because what happens is many people are very uncomfortable with compliments. Why is that? Because it's an opposition or antithesis to their self-talk. Hey, you're great at this, or you look really good at this. You look really good, or hey, you look like you're really healthy, or whatever. And inside you say, no, I'm not. I haven't been to the gym. I didn't do my hair, or I'm not really a good fundraiser, or I'm not a good mother or father. And it's an opposition, and they're very uncomfortable. And what they'll probably try to do, the number one thing try to do is deflect it, or they'll try to lessen the compliment. And so I don't do it to do people, but I give a lot of compliments. I say thank you all the time. Again, that's of my choice to do that. So there's just two. And I got more, but those are just two.
No, I love both of those, right? Like the power of gratitude, right? Because then we're recognizing the goodness around us, right? And those things that are impacting us and those individuals especially, right? And I think like you've talked a lot about your mother in this conversation, right? And just the impact that she had on you and many of the good decisions that you've made over the course of your life, right? And the fact that she kind of banned you from her house because you were not making good decisions, right? Like that is such a strength and a power of love that's really hard to do. Like, but then the second thing, right? The esteemable nature of ourselves, right? Like, I think that I heard it once said, and I started to reflect on this, is that it's much easier to share our struggles with somebody than it is to share our wins. And as we look at those that we can share our wins with, are probably some of those people that are closest to us. Because it comes down to, again, right, am I really worthy of it, right? Like, where is my self-talk? What do I believe, right? Like, and I think we just get self-conscious about, well, I don't want to come across prideful or arrogant or what, like, I don't know what it is, right? But recognizing our wins has such power to it because then again, it's another form of gratitude, right? Like, we're recognizing the good things that are occurring around us and to us.
It's interesting. I'm listening to you, and you have made a statement that I don't know what this means, and you do. It just many times we have to take time to think. And that's one of the things that I teach when I work with men. And I'm not saying anything against you, Jeremy, at all. So please don't take it that way. What I'm saying is when I have an individual who is struggling, and one of the number one things I teach and support men is in thinking. And I do a lot of definitions. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does fear mean? What does pride mean? What does respect mean? What does courage mean? And we'll talk an hour because most people have a hard time defining what is grace. They live, they would struggle. I've asked every man I've ever worked with, I've asked them to define fear and also to define courage. Every, ask them to define what is a win. One of the main things that I talk to people about is what is a problem? What is a problem, Jeremy? What is a problem?
That, that's a great question because to me, right, like my first instinct is it's an obstacle to be overcome, but maybe it's not necessarily something that needs to be overcome, but an obstacle or a challenge in our course to who we're striving to be.
A problem is a set of circumstances that seeks a solution.
Okay.
So let me give you an example of this. 2 plus 2 is not a problem. 2 plus 2 is a statement. 2 plus 2 equals is a problem because of the equal sign. It seeks a solution. Set of circumstances, 2 objects plus 2 objects seeks a solution, which is the equal sign or more than or less than, and then we solve for it. Whether it's a math problem, a word problem, or a life problem, it's a set of circumstances that seeks a solution. And sometimes, and this is difficult for a lot of people, the solution is just acceptance of that set of circumstances. And when we get comfortable, so a lot of times when I guys come to me with problems, all right, what's the truth? What's the set of circumstances? Is it seeking a solution or is it just a statement? And then sometimes the solution or the answer, many times, is just acceptance that this is God's truth. I had a problem when my mom died. I had a problem. And the problem was I couldn't talk to my mom anymore. I couldn't seek her counsel. I can't bring her back. There's no solution in the physical world for me to bring her presence back.
Right.
So therefore, the solution is acceptance that this is God's truth, or this is just truth. And we just want to use the word truth. That this is a fact, this is the truth, and we need to marry and to move on in acceptance.
Well, it's
So anyway, that's how I work, and that's
yeah, no, I like that idea, right? Like I think so often we want a solution, right? Like if we got a problem, it needs a solution, right? Like I got to figure this out. When in reality, like sometimes it's just acceptance, right? Like so
a
as
lot of
you know,
time.
like we were scheduled to do this yesterday. I ran into some travel issues
Mhm.
and so forth, right? Like so as I'm traveling home with my wife and 2 daughters. We're traveling from South Carolina to Utah, and we had a layover scheduled in Nashville. Well, there was some rain, thunderstorms, lightning, gnarly weather in Nashville. So we ended up kind of circling around, waiting to see if we could get clearance to land. No clearance came. They tried to land in Memphis. Memphis was overloaded, so we rerouted to Atlanta. And my daughter she's a varsity cheerleader. She was supposed to be with her stunt group last night after we got home. We were supposed to get home and she had some plans and whatnot. But nonetheless, we got pushed and she wasn't gonna make it, right? And so then she's also got practice this morning where she's gotta be there at 7 a.m. So now she's freaking out. So it's like, here's the problem, right? Like we need to get home and I need to be home at this certain time. But but the reality of it is, right, like, I can't control the weather. I
Right.
can't control the flights, right? Like, yeah, could we have flown home a day earlier? That some of the but at this point, it's too late to make that change, right? That's past. And so but there's or really this reality that there are things within our control as humans, right? Things that I can make choices about. And sure, we can get into a much deeper philosophical conversation on that one about agency or not, right? Like, but I believe that we are free to make choices, right? But then there are these things that are outside of our control. And it's when problems are faced by the uncontrollable that we then need to learn to live in more acceptance, right? And be able to embrace that experience of acceptance, which your example of your mother is spot on, right? Like can't control her
Can't bring it
passing,
back.
right? Like you can't bring her back. I can't like I have the memories, right? I have the things that she's taught me, but and that's what I get to live on now, but I can't have those one-on-one conversations with her because I can't bring her back. That's not right. That's completely uncontrollable. And so then there's this acceptance. I can't control how my flights line up when there's bad weather. I get rerouted, right? Like, and so, yeah, I need to just live in acceptance. It's when we start to fight against the uncontrollable or seek to try to solve the uncontrollable that we then begin banging our heads against the wall and find problems in life and we find faults and we find issues. But when we learn to let go or to have live in acceptance of the uncontrollable, then we are more apt and able to control the things that we can control and then just let the rest kind of be and live in a more, I don't know, exalted, higher state, I guess, in letting things be as they are, as hard as that certainly is for many of us, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just there's a lot to unpack there. But in the end, so one of the first things we have to do is what's the truth? What is the reality and the truth around this situation? The word I use, a set of circumstances. Okay. Then is it solvable? Is it solvable by me? Okay. Or people that I have that I can affect? There are hungry people in South Sudan, Africa, right?
For sure.
Is that a problem for me? Actually, it's not a problem because it's a set of circumstances that I cannot solve for, nor do I have agency to work with people. If I truly believe that was a problem for me on an individual basis, then I would do my research and maybe give a donation, but I choose not to. That's my decision, and I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very cognizant of what I can and cannot do. And then also what that which is important to me as an individual. The other thing is that we got to make sure it's not a statement versus is it a problem? And then this is a big one. Then I'm really big on how do we feel as opposed to intellect, as opposed to action. Okay. And I'm a big one on intellect. I'm a big one on cognitive. I'm a big one on learning and intelligence and using this gift that we have. Or if we don't have the gift, to seek outside counsel so that we can see truth, that we can make a decision. And what I'm bringing it back down to rarely do I make decisions based on feeling. Rare. Because I know feeling is not cognitive, it's an opinion. That's what a feeling is. It's an opinion. And what we do under feelings can be inimical to me, my family, and society. Right? And I had to learn that coming out of prison. I had to literally learn that lesson. One of the things
Yeah.
that I teach on is the power of words. And I don't know if you have them, Jeremy. I don't know. But there were certain words, if I heard, I had a script that I had to play out. And I'm talking about in a physical way. Usually verbal. I'll threaten you first, then I will physically do whatever I can to cause you pain and discomfort. Okay. That's over words,
Yeah.
just
Yep.
vibration of vocal cords. I have it now that unless you threaten or hurt my family, you can call me anything in the world. Literally, you can call me. But as long as you're not threatening, and I'm talking about physically threatening me or threatening my family, I'm cool. I'm cool. Be like, why? Why you want to call me that? I'm not that. That's on you.
Yeah.
You have the problem.
I think that, well, and that comes back to, right, I asked you about worth earlier, and I think it's like it comes back to understanding your own individual worth, right, and where you sit in that. And I think, like, as we look at problems and worth really have, I think there's a very correlated impact on those, right? Like,
I can speak on that for next hour. When it comes down to, so I just did a book study, 4 months on self-esteem. I've been teaching on self-esteem for 12, 13 years. And there's two aspects of self-esteem. One is competency. Am I competent to make good decisions in my life? That's competency, or good decisions at the job or in my relationships, family. Am I competent? That's one. And then am I worthy of love? Am I lovable? Okay. But the competency comes from making a succession of good decisions. As an addict, I had a succession of bad decisions. So my self-esteem was, I was afraid of me. I was afraid of my decision making capability because I would decide to do that which is short term. I would decide to do that would do one of two things: gain me pleasure or push away pain. And one of the greatest gifts of being sane, I'm going to use that term, sane, is the ability to embrace pain and understand pain. Because that's the fundamental, is pain. It's the fundamental. It's the fundamental between fear. What
But
is fear? And I
okay,
don't know what's going on with
yeah,
you,
I'll
Mark.
answer that question, and then I want you to
Yeah.
I
Okay.
want you to
Let me
kind of
just let
explain
me just say what
fundamental, right?
fear
Like,
is. Fear is the future anticipation or expectation of pain. That's all it is. But the fundamental is pain. And this has been my experience. 100% all anger is a manifestation of fear. For me, it has been always. There's
yeah,
always fear underlying all of my anger for me. And I'm not speaking for others. You may have a definition where you are angry, but there was no fear or pain. Cool, cool with that. I have it, and I've been looking at it for 15 years.
yeah, no, I like that definition of fear, right? Like, it's the anticipation of pain, right? Or like, and I would even go as far as maybe to say the unjustified anticipation of pain. I think so, at times it's justified, right?
No,
Like,
no,
it's
Jeremy,
certainly
I got to push
justified,
back
but
on that one, bro.
that's fair.
No, no, there is good fear. There is good fear. And fear is an emotion that's a lot quicker than the cognitive. So if back in the day and I see a saber-toothed tiger, I don't want to sit there and think about, hey, I wonder how long that tooth is that he has on that saber tooth. Gee, I wonder why he's like running towards me. Does he want to say hello? No, I want to be in fear and climb up that tree or grab my spear or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
Fear is to protect. And that's why it's so much quicker in the brain than the cognitive. It's a different part of the brain. Okay. It's more on the primitive back here. This is where we do our cognitive. That's why it's so big in humans. And I tell people, remember I said, what a gift that God gives us, pain. Do you know there are people who are born and they cannot feel pain
yeah,
and they break legs, they hurt themselves, and they or die early because they do not have that
pain receptors,
input.
yeah,
Yeah, they don't have that input that says this is wrong. That's burning your hand, or your leg is getting ready to break because it's stuck and you got a little pain, and I'm going to stop doing that. So, pain is beautiful. Okay. It's what you do with that pain. And then how do you lessen the opportunities that are controllable for pain? Remember my speech, I talked from the stage, resilience in the face of the known and unknown. Okay, those are setback. A setback is pain, discomfort. But there's ones that we know are coming. We know our mother's or dad is going to pass away at some point.
yeah,
We're younger. Well, at least we usually are. We're younger. So we know that. And sometimes they're very sick or they're dying. I've had that obviously within my family. I knew that was coming. And I could prepare to be resilient. And I did. I had a whole thing that I had literally mentored or spoke with my sponsor about what am I going to do because I love my mom so much when she passes. And then there's ones that we don't know. We got the kid got hit by a car, or I woke up, my wife says she's leaving me. Didn't happen to me, but you know what I'm saying?
sure,
We
yeah.
had no clue this was happening. None. And how do we bounce back from that setback? And there's skill sets that we can do.
No, so good. Yeah, I think that gives like, and I love like again, it goes back to defining words, right? Like, I love the importance of just pondering, thinking about, okay, what do these words mean? What do they mean to me? How do they impact my decisions? How do they impact truth? How do they impact the way that I react and respond? Um, and I think the more that we sit back and start to think about, okay, what do they really mean? Then the more we can use these words to our benefit in the long run, right? So one other word I want you to define before we end here is inspire. What does it mean to be inspired?
Where it comes from, to bring in the spirit. That's where the word comes from. To bring in the spirit. Inspire, in spirit. And what it means is to bring in through usually external. But if you're deep into prayer and meditation, you bring it literally from an internal conversation with whatever spiritual entity you believe in, whether you define it as God, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Allah. And those are just the major religions. But what it means is to bring into spirit for the why, the motivation, and the reasoning to engage in specific, I believe, action and behavior. So for me, I don't get inspired to breathe just to breathe. I don't need that inspiration. But there are times where I need inspiration and its kissing cousin, courage, to be able to undertake a task or a next indicated action that may be uncomfortable for me. Okay. And I need that inspiration. And I do it. Let me give you a great example of inspiration. I used to be a runner, and I'm talking about running, 10Ks, 5 miles, 10 miles, things like that, half marathons, stuff like that. And those who are listening, who are runners, know that it can be painful and or discomforting, and until you get to that place we call the runner's high. But there'll be
Still
times
painful and discomforting after the runner's high. So,
to me, I don't know about you. There were times I could run. I felt like I could run forever. That was such beautiful. But anyway, usually for me, from usually about 2 minutes to 13 minutes, it was painful. And then I would kick in, the endorphins would kick in. But there would be times I'd be running. Let's say I'm running for an hour. Let's say I'm running for 2 hours. And I want to, and I would, one of two places I would go. I said, no, I'm going to do this for my mother. I'm going to make that marker there. Or I'm going to make this time 2 more minutes here. Or I would do it for my wife. That was I would bring in the spirit, the thought, because that's external to me. Really, it's
yeah.
metaphysical. And this is a truth. Never have I failed to meet that mark. Now, if I was doing it for myself, man, I 1,000 times let myself down. 1,000 times. But if I said I'm doing it for my mother who had passed away or my wife who had passed away, I would do it. And I would do it. That's inspiration.
Love it. So what inspires you today, now?
Gratitude is one. Love is another. Calling is another. Probably those are the three main ones. We talk about gratitude. I always say to people, you say you're grateful. What are the actions behind that gratitude? To walk around to say I'm grateful. Hey, that's great for you. But if you have gratitude, how do you give that back? How do you honor wherever that came from, whether you call it God or not? How do you honor that? And then love, and I'm talking about love of my fellow man, love of my community of Black men. I work a lot within that community,
Yeah.
love of my family, and then love of my God and love of self. And when I think about those, that's what inspires me. And then the way I manifest it is a lot of my it's grind. I
Yeah.
grind.
No, that's profound. Like, it's one thing to say or write down what we're grateful for, but do we put it into action? Do we put that gratitude into an active gratitude, right? It's so good. Well, To conclude today, this has been such a fantastic conversation. You read a lot, so tell us what are a couple of books that you would, aside from your own book, which we'll put in the show notes. So the your story and being able to dive into that for sure. But what are a couple other books that you would highly recommend to others that have impacted you?
Every single man that I mentor always starts off with the same two books. Every single one. I've worked with over 50 men. And those are The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Brandon and The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. Those are the first two books I recommend to every single person, at least every single person I work with. If somebody
Yeah,
comes with a specific area or problem, I would say, you know, go here, go there, because I'm not mentoring you. But every mentor, those are my first two books.
I do love Covey. Speed of Trust is a great book. I haven't read The Six Pillars, so
Please
I
do.
will. Yeah, I will put that one on the short list for the near future. Excellent. Well, Ken, this was a pleasure. Thank you again for joining us. So good. Such a fun conversation. As you've mentioned, we could talk for hours here about a lot of these things, and we could get into philosophically defining words and
Mhm.
going around on that, which would be a lot of fun. But we'll spare our listeners and we'll leave this at about an hour. So thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I'm very appreciative. And thank you, Jeremy, for your time. And thank you to all the listeners that are watching or seeing this show. Thank you for your investment of your time in your growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Be sure to share this episode. Again, thanks for joining us on A Bit of Curiosity and have a wonderful day.